I viewed this as an inevitable, unfortunately, something like this, that we were going to see the caustic political environment potentially turn violent. Do you share that view? Did you share that view?
Not only, I mean, I would say you were understating it a little bit in calling it inevitable. I think the caustic political environment had already turned violent, and now it's just extended straight into the greater Washington, D.C. area. I mean, look, there's no doubt that we're in a political environment right now where some of the rhetoric is the kind of rhetoric that inspires, I'm not going to say incites, because those are two different words with two different meanings, that inspires people to act out violently. When you're talking about things like phrases like civil war, when you're talking about that policies kill people, you know, these things can cause some people to hear the words and apply them often quite literally. And that's one of the things that I think that is happening in our nation. And we've seen it elsewhere. We just hadn't seen it hit official Washington in the way that it has. And this should be an alarm bell in the night towards people. This should be an alarm bell not to restrict free speech in any way, shape, or form, but an alarm bell to exercise a degree of responsibility and understanding of the humanity of your opponent as another person created in the image of God who enjoys the blessings of American liberty and is entitled to blessings of American liberty every bit as much as my side is, as my tribe is.
Look, it's well put. You know, Mo Brooks today, who was used his belt to apply a tourniquet to Steve Scalise, and we may in fact find out that he ended up saving his life at some point. I thought he put out a fascinating statement, and Ruth, I want to get your response to it. He writes this, talking about all the different parts, ways people are blaming left and right of what we have here. And he writes, the Second Amendment as a right to bear arms is to ensure that we always have a republic. And as with any constitutional provision in the Bill of Rights, there are adverse aspects to each of those rights that we enjoy as people. And what we just saw here is one of the bad side effects of someone not exercising those rights properly. But we're not going to get rid of freedom of speech because some people say some really ugly things that hurt other people's feelings. We're not going to get rid of the Fourth Amendment search and seizure rights because it allows some criminals to go free who should be behind bars. I thought it was an important point there, Ruth, that it's sort of like we're all going to jump the gun and look for a quick cure here when really it's about political leadership and common sense.
Well, I think there's a lot of gun jumping, and maybe gun jumping isn't the best phrase to use on a terrible day like this, in people's reactions to this. I guess I look at it and I think that insanity knows no political ideology, and you are going to have crazy people on the left and crazy people on the right who are going to do terrible things, and David is right. They may be revved up by rhetoric that is not intended to, or even, you know, you can't even imagine it would have those consequences when you say it. But we should all, I think, step back for a minute, and instead of going directly to our usual corners about really kind of tired arguments about Second Amendment and the best, you know, a good guy with a gun stopped a bad guy with a gun on one side, and talking about the laxness of gun control laws on the other side. Can't we just pause for a minute on all of that, number one? And I guess number two, there's been a lot of talk on social media and elsewhere today about the consequences of elevated and intensified rhetoric on the left leading to this. And you could easily imagine, we had it, of course, in the Charleston shooting, the terrible church shooting, rhetoric on the other side that's blamed for other things. I think we just need to just kind of pause for a moment. I'm a little bit with Helene in terms of the capacity to come together for very long, but at least let's stay out of our usual corners for a little bit.
Well, it's happened in Washington. It's not happened in the virtual space. You guys are sticking around with me. I appreciate that. Helene, David, and Ruth, I want to pause here. Coming up, I'm going to speak with two members of Congress, both sides of the aisle. They're going to appear together on the political environment that has sparked this. And we're awaiting an update from authorities on today's shooting in Alexandria that, of course, has left Congressman Steve Scalise and 4 others injured. We're going to bring you that live when it happens. As I think David French, who I'm about to go back to, pointed out, our tribal nature. Mark Kelly, thanks for coming on, providing your perspective. You have, unfortunately, a unique perspective on an issue like this.
Well, thanks for having me on, Chuck. Appreciate it.
Let me bring back the panel, Helene, David, and Ruth. David, I want to start with you. An interesting diagnosis there from Mark Kelly, but he does bring up a point in the fact is, you brought up the tribal issue, and I hear the word tribe now more and more, which is people just go hide in their safe spaces, maybe their safe political space, and they assume, oh, the other side is the caustic one, not our side, and vice versa. And then the more you stay in your own tribe, the more it's easy to dehumanize somebody not in it.
Well, that's right. I mean, one of the things that we see now that occurs is the first thing, when there is a tragedy, when there is a shooting, when there's an attack, the first impulse by many people is to say, well, how can I turn this either to my advantage and use it as a club to beat the other person, or how can I distance myself from it so as to not damage my underlying political point of view? And that's a very damaging dynamic that's emerging. And I think it's important to say, that this is not, and again, to emphasize that what happened today is not a one-off, completely isolated event of political violence in this country. We're not at the point where we were in the 1960s and early 70s, thank God, but I think we're at the most volatile point that we've been since then. There have been attacks. People have died around this country as a result of politically motivated violence, and it's time for a little bit of shock treatment for people to wake up. And it's not civility. Civility is kind of a shallow term. It's respect. Respect is a deeper term.
You know, Ruth, David brings up, you know, perhaps the most vitriolic time since that period of, I guess you could say, 68 to the mid-70s. We certainly had multiple people, either elected leaders, get gunned down or attempted assassinations. Do we have the leaders that could actually rise to the occasion right now?
Well, I think that the members of Congress, the members of the House, the Speaker, the Minority Leader did their best, and I think deserve a lot of credit for doing a good job of rising to the occasion. And I'm going to surprise some people who've heard me talk about President Trump in the past, but he rose to the occasion today. He used soothing words instead of incendiary words. There are tweets that he could have tweeted that we haven't read, or at least haven't read yet. And I think that he acted in the way today that you want to see a president act. What we need to figure out in this country is how to keep that going for more than a day or a week or a month, not just from the president, but from other members of Congress. And, you know, if you go back to the things that people were saying after Gabby Giffords was tragically shot, you do get a little bit discouraged in thinking that that can really happen.
Yeah, Helene, I guess the real test to me is, where are we in a month?
I think that is the test, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer today of all days, but I'm not particularly hopeful. But I do think Ruth is right. I think President Trump struck the right chord today. We've heard soothing words of unity coming from congressional Republicans and Democrats on the Hill. So let's see where we go from there. But this is not. I mean, you started off this asking, do we have the political leaders right now who are capable of rising to the occasion? They're certainly capable of it, but in the past they haven't demonstrated that. They haven't demonstrated anything but divisiveness in the last year or two. So we'll see how this plays out and what they do in the month going forward.
David, it's quite a test, I think, for President Trump, because I don't know if 70% of the country will listen to what he has to say right now.
Right. I mean, that's a problem that he has to deal with, and respect for political opponents is not exactly the phrase you would use to characterize Donald Trump. But sometimes shock to the system can cause people to change. Maybe a shock to the system can cause people to grow up. I mean, time will tell. I'm with you. Where are we going to be in a month from now? It's easy to take this stance today. It's what everyone demands. Where are we a month from now?
All right, David French, Helene Cooper, Ruth Marcus. It's been a rough day. I guess the one piece of good news out of it is that Congress is acting responsibly today. Hopefully they take this lesson and go forward. Anyway, all three of you, I appreciate it. Thanks very much for your time. And guess what? We in the media, we have a role to play too. We need to be calling out.